So where are we in terms of vaccines? There are 67 vaccines, SARS-CoV-2 vaccines in human trials. There are 20 vaccines that have reached phase 3 efficacy trials. That's the final sequence of trials that can lead to approval for use. There are 8 vaccines in early or limited use. As you know, 2 vaccines have been approved by the FDA for emergency use, and there have been 4 vaccine candidates that have been abandoned. So let's just take a look at the ones that are most advanced. So Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, the RNA vaccines, as you know, 94 to 95% effective, unbelievable result. It's active, these vaccines are active across all age groups. They are now approved for emergency use by the FDA. The challenge they have is a super cold chain, which will complicate their global distribution. In fact, it really won't, they're really not amenable to global distribution. Production is currently an issue, primarily driven by the lipid nanoparticle, we think. They are preparing, both Pfizer and Moderna are preparing a booster shot if needed to counter the variants from South Africa and Brazil, which Melanie will talk about shortly. AstraZeneca has been in the news recently. They are developed a prime boost regimen involving a vaccination and then followed by the boost 12 weeks later. They're finding that this vaccine is 82% effective with 2 doses, 76% effective with 1 dose. Their trial was conducted in the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Brazil. So they were facing the South African and Brazilian variants. There were no severe infections or hospitalizations 3 weeks after the second dose, suggesting some effectiveness, good effectiveness against the variants. Johnson & Johnson, this is the only single shot regimen. It is 72% effective in the United States, but worldwide dropped down to 66%, primarily driven by less success against the variants in terms of preventing infection. However, it has 85% ability to protect against severe disease. Indeed, there were no hospitalizations or deaths, including at the South African trial site. So these vaccines are, they may not prevent you from getting infected, but they'll prevent you from getting very sick, even with the variants. These vaccines have no onerous super cold chain. They could be a vaccine with a global reach. Now, that said, Johnson & Johnson is testing a 2-shot regimen to see if they can increase their effectiveness. Novavax has just also reported phase 3 trials. There is a spike protein with encapsulated in a nanoparticle, and they reported 90% protection against the wild type SARS-CoV-2, but then only 50% against the South African variant. The Russians have developed an adenoviral vectored spike vaccine, actually 2 adenoviruses. It's called Sputnik 5. They've reported a 91.6% efficacy. They've even discussed partnering with AstraZeneca to put their 2 vaccines together. They're beginning to look at a single dose vaccination, what's called a trial that's called Sputnik Light. And Mexico and Argentina are purchasing the Sputnik vaccine and deploying it in their countries. Then there's the 2 Chinese efforts, Sinovac and Sinopharm. They're both they're both inactivated viral vaccines. So this is the full virus that has been inactivated. Sinovac has an alum adjuvant. Now, this has been very strange. Initially reported to be high efficacy and then later revised down to 50%. They registered the vaccine in China with a 78% success in Brazil. And Brazil is now buying that vaccine. Sinopharm also had a similar level of effectiveness, 79.3%. Sanofi and GSK, their vaccine did not work in the elderly. And they think they probably missed the dose. So they're reevaluating a higher dose regimen, but that's going to take a lot of time. They have offered to use their facilities to produce the RNA vaccines, which I think is fantastic. Merck has withdrawn. Their vaccines lack the requisite immunogenicity. I will say that Indeed, the bar has been set very high by the RNA vaccines. So that's kind of a summary of the different vaccines. I think that welcome the J&J, welcome the AstraZeneca. These vaccines can be produced inexpensively and distributed globally. And I think we're going to see, particularly the J&J was a single shot, could have a profound global impact. Now, the last thing on the vaccines, well, will these RNA vaccines stop asymptomatic infections? And then really the question is, how long do we have to wear masks? Right now, the concern is that people may be vaccinated and protected from serious disease, but they could still be carrying the virus in their nose and shedding the virus and passing it on to other people. So the recommendation is to wear a mask even after you're vaccinated to prevent you from infecting someone else. There are some hints that that the vaccines may be protecting against this type or limiting this type of asymptomatic infection. In the Moderna vaccine trial, there were 54 people who became asymptomatically infected between the first and the second dose. 39 of those people were in the placebo group, while 15 were in the vaccine group, suggesting a 62% efficacy in preventing asymptomatic or at least PCR positivity in the nose. There was also a recent vaccination trial in Israel. 50,000 people received the first dose of the Pfizer RNA vaccine, and they observed a 60% decrease in asymptomatic infection as detected by PCR prior to day 21. And so this is, and then AstraZeneca has also reported about a 67% decrease in PCR positive nasal swabs after the first dose of their vaccine. Interestingly, it dropped to 50% after the second dose of the vaccine. But all of these indicate that there's likely these vaccines are limiting, but perhaps not eliminating the possibilities of asymptomatic infection. So more trials will be done.